My husband slapped my mouth in front of his coworkers because of a joke. He did not realize that he just ended his own career. My husband Craig slapped me at his company dinner in March, right in front of his boss and 12 coworkers. I'd made a joke about him leaving his socks everywhere. Everyone laughed. Craig didn't. He turned and hit me across the mouth, quick and sharp, then laughed like it was nothing. Just keeping the wife in line, you know how it is. His boss, Richard, looked uncomfortable but chuckled along. The others went quiet for a second. Then someone changed the subject. Craig squeezed my shoulder. Hard. Don't embarrass me like that again. I touched my lip. It was bleeding. Craig handed me a napkin. Clean yourself up. You're making a scene. I went to the bathroom, stared at my face in the mirror, split lip, red mark across my cheek. When I came back, Craig was telling another story. Everyone was laughing again, like nothing happened. In the car, Craig was annoyed. You made me look bad, joking about my habits like I'm some child. I said nothing. He kept going. Richard probably thinks I can't control my own household. This could affect my promotion. Your promotion? You hit me. Craig rolled his eyes. I barely touched you. Stop being so dramatic. You've always been too sensitive. The next morning, my lip was swollen. Craig didn't apologize. Instead, he complained about breakfast being late. I'm meeting Richard for golf. Can't be late because you're moving slowly. That's when I decided Craig was right about one thing. This would definitely affect his promotion. I called Craig's company HR, asked about their domestic violence policies. Very strict, zero tolerance. Any employee who commits violence faces immediate termination, even outside work, especially if it involves other employees as witnesses. Interesting. I made an appointment for Monday, wore a turtleneck to hide the bruise on my shoulder. The HR director, Janet, was very professional. You said you needed to discuss a sensitive matter? My husband, Craig, hit me at the company dinner on Friday night, in front of Richard and the entire Northeast sales team. Craig Dalton? Is your husband Craig Dalton? Yes. He slapped me when I made a joke. Richard saw it. Everyone saw it. This is serious. We need to investigate immediately. By Tuesday, they'd interviewed everyone at the dinner. Most tried to downplay it. Just a marital spat. Didn't see much. Couples being couples. But 2 people told the truth. Craig's coworker, Brendan, and his wife. They described the slap, the blood, the way Craig laughed about it. On Wednesday, Craig was suspended pending investigation. He came home furious. You went to my work? Are you insane? You hit me in front of your coworkers. That's insane. It was nothing. A tap. Now I might lose my job. Good. Craig grabbed my wrist. You're going to call Janet right now. Tell her you exaggerated. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. I pulled away. No. He stepped closer. This is my career. Our income. How will we pay the mortgage? Maybe you shouldn't have hit your wife at a company event. Craig punched the wall. Now you've done it. When I fix this, you're going to regret ruining my life. Thursday. Craig tried to fix it himself. Called Richard. Told him I was mentally unstable. On medication. Made things up for attention. Richard didn't buy it. Craig, I saw you hit her. We all did. She provoked me. She's always provoking me. Richard reported this conversation to HR. Said Craig showed no remorse. Was actually blaming me. Making threats about what would happen when he fixed this. Friday, Craig was fired. Came home with a cardboard box. 20 years with that company. 20 years. Gone because you couldn't keep your mouth shut? You mean because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself? Craig threw the box at me. Missed. You've destroyed everything. My reputation is ruined. Word spread quickly. Craig applied to other companies. They'd call for references. Richard would tell them exactly why Craig was terminated. Physical violence against a spouse at a company function. No one would touch him. Craig's brother called me. You need to help Craig. He made a mistake. Tell people it wasn't that bad. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. He hit me in public. His brother got angry. Are you destroying his life over one slap? He destroyed his own life. And it wasn't the first time. Just the first time with witnesses. By month 2, Craig couldn't find work. We were behind on the mortgage. He blamed me every day. If you hadn't gone to HR, if you weren't so sensitive, I won't suffer like this. He hit me again, slapping the back of my head over and over again. He would not stop even though I was crying. But someone swung a pan right at his head and he screamed in pain. Standing at his back was his mother, Juliet. She raised the pan higher and told me to get my purse and phone. Her voice shook but stayed firm. I grabbed my bag from the counter, fumbling with the zipper. My phone was on the table. I snatched it. Craig pushed himself up from the floor, blood running down his temple. He touched his head and looked at his hand, seeing red. His eyes went wide, then narrow. He took a step toward us. Juliet moved between us, the pan still up like a weapon. Craig stopped. He pointed at me and started screaming about how I ruined everything, how this was all my fault, how he'd make me pay for destroying his life. Juliet backed toward the door, pulling me with her. Craig followed, yelling louder. We reached the front door and Juliet yanked it open. She pushed me outside first, then came after me, keeping herself between Craig and me the whole time. He stumbled after us onto the porch, his words turning into threats about what he'd do when he caught us. We ran to her car in the driveway. I got in the passenger side. my hands shaking so hard I couldn't get the seatbelt clicked. Juliet started the engine and backed out fast, tires squealing. Craig stood in the yard, pointing and shouting. I watched him through the side mirror as we drove away. He was still yelling, still making threats. My whole body wouldn't stop shaking. I kept thinking about the look in his eyes right before Juliet hit him. He wasn't going to stop. He would have kept hitting me until something really bad happened. His own mother had to use a frying pan to save me from him. At Juliet's house, she led me inside and locked the door behind us. She checked the lock twice. Then she went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Her hands trembled as she got 2 mugs from the cabinet. She kept saying she was sorry, over and over. I sat at her kitchen table and didn't know what to say. The tea kettle whistled and she poured hot water over tea bags. She brought the mugs to the table and sat across from me. She started talking about Craig's father, how he used to hit her too, how she left him when Craig was 12. She said she saw signs in Craig over the years, little things, his temper, the way he talked about me sometimes. But she told herself he was different, that he learned from watching what his father did, that he would never become like that. She cried while she talked. I told her about the other times Craig hit me, when no one was around to see it, when I couldn't prove it happened. She reached across the table and held my hand. She kept crying and apologizing. I cried too. We sat there drinking tea and crying together for a long time. Juliet said I needed to stay with her. I started to argue, but she cut me off. She said Craig would come looking for me at our house, that he'd be even angrier now. She picked up her phone and said she was calling the police. I felt sick. Reporting him to HR was one thing. Calling the police felt bigger, scarier. What if it made everything worse? Juliet looked at me hard. She said Craig already tried to hurt me badly, that he wasn't going to stop on his own, that next time she might not be there with a pan. She dialed before I could think of another argument. I sat frozen on her couch while she talked to the dispatcher. She gave our address, described what happened, said her son attacked me and she had to stop him with a frying pan, that I had injuries and needed help. I stared at the wall and wondered how my life turned into a police report, how I went from making a joke at a dinner to this. The dispatcher said officers were on their way. Juliet hung up and sat next to me. She put her arm around my shoulders. We waited together. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later, a man and a woman. They asked me what happened and I told them. My voice came out quiet and shaky. They took pictures of my head and neck. The bruises were already forming, dark purple marks where Craig's hand connected over and over. The female officer asked if Juliet saw what happened. Juliet described walking into her son beating me, how she grabbed the pan and hit him to make him stop, how much blood there was. The officers wrote everything down. Then they asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at Juliet. She nodded. I said yes, barely louder than a whisper. The male officer said they'd go arrest Craig tonight, that he'd be charged with domestic assault. The female officer said I did the right thing reporting it, that these situations usually get worse if nobody stops them. They gave me paperwork about what happens next. Court dates, procedures, things I didn't really understand yet. The officers explained how to get a restraining order. They said I should file for one first thing in the morning. The male officer mentioned that Craig got fired for workplace violence, that it would help my case, show a pattern. I realized that going to HR back in March created a record, proof that this wasn't the first time, that Craig had a history of hitting me. The officer said that paper trail might save my life. They asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I told them I was staying with Juliet. They said that was good, that I shouldn't go back to the house alone. They gave me a card for domestic violence resources, shelters, counseling, legal help. The female officer said to call any time if Craig tried to contact me. They left to go arrest him. I sat on Juliet's couch holding the card and the paperwork. Everything felt unreal. That night, I couldn't sleep. Juliet set me up in her guest room, but I just laid there staring at the ceiling. Every sound made me jump. A car outside, the house settling, wind against the windows. I kept getting up to check that the doors were locked. Around 3 in the morning, Juliet knocked and asked if I was okay. I said I couldn't sleep. She came in and sat on the edge of the bed. She started telling me about leaving Craig's father, how hard it was, how scared she felt. She said she wasted 15 years believing he would change, waiting for him to become the man she thought she married. But he never did. She said the hardest part was admitting all that time was gone, that she couldn't get those years back. We talked until the sun came up. She shared things she never told anyone. I shared things I never said out loud before. By morning, we were both exhausted, but something felt different, like we weren't alone anymore. The phone rang around 9. Juliet answered and then handed it to me. It was the police. They said Craig was arrested last night and charged with domestic assault. He was being held at the county jail. There would be a bail hearing in 2 days. They said because of how bad the attack was, and because I told them about previous times he hit me, they were recommending he stay in jail until trial. I felt relief and fear at the same time. Relief that he was locked up. Fear about what would happen when he got out. Because he would get out eventually. The officer said I should definitely file for that restraining order today. I said I would. After I hung up, I told Juliet what they said. She made breakfast and we ate without talking much. Both of us were thinking about what came next. Juliet drove me to the courthouse. We found the right office, and I filled out forms for a temporary restraining order. The clerk looked at the police report number I gave her. She said they could fast-track it because of the active assault charges. We waited for 2 hours. Finally, a clerk called my name. A judge reviewed my paperwork right there in her office. She looked at the police report, the photos of my injuries. She asked a few questions about Craig's history. Then she signed the order. Craig was legally banned from contacting me, from coming within 500 feet of me. The judge said if he violated it, he'd be arrested immediately. I walked out with the official papers, but I knew a piece of paper wouldn't actually stop Craig if he decided to come after me. It just meant he'd get arrested after he did. The police said I could go back to the house with an escort to get my things. Craig was still in jail, so it was safe. 2 officers met us there. I unlocked the door and went inside. Everything looked exactly the same. Normal. But it felt wrong now. Dirty somehow. I walked through the rooms and saw violence in every corner. The kitchen where he shoved me against the counter. The living room where he grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. The bedroom where he said things that made me feel small and worthless. I packed fast. Clothes, important papers, my laptop, some photos from before everything got bad. The officers helped carry boxes to Juliet's car. I took one last look at the house before we left. I thought about the life I believed I was building here, the future I imagined. None of it was real. It was all built on fear and control disguised as love. I locked the door and left it all behind. Juliet drove me to the bank the next morning. We sat in the parking lot for a minute before going inside. She told me Craig would definitely try to empty the accounts once he made bail or got out. I needed to protect myself now before he could take everything. We walked in and asked to speak with someone about opening a new account. The banker was nice. She didn't ask questions when I explained I needed an account in only my name. She set everything up in 20 minutes. Then we went to a different bank where Craig and I had our joint savings. I showed my ID and asked to withdraw half of what was in there. The teller checked the balance and printed out a slip. $4,000 and change total. I took $2,000 in cash. My hands shook signing the withdrawal form. This was really happening. I was splitting our money, ending our financial life together. Juliet drove us back to her house and I deposited the cash in my new account using the mobile app. She handed me an envelope with $2,000 bills inside. I can't take this. You already let me stay here. She pushed it back toward me. You need a safety net. Craig left you with nothing. This gives you options. I tried to argue, but she wouldn't hear it. Finally, I took the money and hugged her. I felt like I could breathe a little easier knowing I had something of my own. The phone rang that afternoon while we were making lunch. Juliet answered and her face went hard. She walked into the other room, but I could hear her voice getting louder. When she came back, she looked upset. That was Xavier. He wanted to know where you are. What did you tell him? That you're safe and he needs to stay out of it. He said I'm overreacting to a family dispute. Juliet sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. I told him I saw Craig trying to beat you unconscious. That this isn't a dispute. This is assault. He hung up on me. She looked up at me with tired eyes. Not everyone in Craig's family is going to support you. Some of them will take his side no matter what. Xavier thinks I'm betraying my own son. I reached across and squeezed her hand. You saved my life. She nodded, but I could see it hurt her. Choosing between her son and doing the right thing was tearing her apart. The phone rang again an hour later. Juliet looked at the caller ID and didn't answer. It rang 4 more times that evening. She turned off the ringer, and we ate dinner in silence. 2 days later, we drove to the courthouse for Craig's bail hearing. I wore sunglasses even though we were inside because I didn't want anyone to see how scared I looked. The courtroom was small and cold. Craig sat at a table with his lawyer wearing an orange jumpsuit. He didn't look at me when we walked in. The judge came in and everyone stood. Then Craig's lawyer started talking. He said Craig wasn't a flight risk, had no prior criminal record, worked at the same company for 20 years before a recent termination, was a stable member of the community. The prosecutor stood up. She was younger than I expected. She said Craig was terminated from his job for workplace violence against his spouse, that there was a documented pattern of abuse in my statement to police, that he showed no remorse and actually blamed the victim. The judge looked at Craig. Do you have anything to say? Craig stood up. Your Honor, my wife and I had a disagreement that got out of hand. I was under a lot of stress from losing my job. The judge cut him off. This isn't about stress. This is about assault. Bail is set at $50,000. Craig's face went white. Your Honor, I can't afford that. The judge closed the file. Then you'll remain in custody until trial. Next case. Guards led Craig away. He finally looked at me then. Pure hate in his eyes. I looked right back without flinching. Juliet took me to meet with a divorce lawyer the next day. The office was in a small building near her church. The lawyer's name was on a brass plate by the door. Inside, the waiting room had comfortable chairs and magazines. A woman came out and introduced herself as the attorney Juliet had found. She shook my hand and led us back to her office. I explained everything. The assault at the company dinner. Craig getting fired. The months of blame and anger. The attack at home. She took notes and asked questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. I can take your case. Given the circumstances, I'll reduce my usual rate. She explained that Craig's unemployment would work in my favor. His violence would too. The court wouldn't look kindly on an abusive spouse who couldn't support himself. She pulled out papers and started filling them in. I signed my name at the bottom. My hand shook, but I got through it. She made copies and put them in a folder with my name on it. I'll file these tomorrow. You should receive a court date within a few weeks. I thanked her and we left. In the car, Juliet asked how I felt. I told her I felt like I was finally doing something instead of just surviving. The domestic violence shelter counselor met with me 3 days later. Juliet had set up the appointment. The counselor's office had soft lighting and tissues on every table. She asked me to tell her about my marriage. I started with the company dinner, but she stopped me. Go back further. When did you first notice something was wrong? I thought about it. Craig had always been controlling about money, about who I spent time with. He said it was because he cared. The counselor nodded. That's financial abuse and isolation, common tactics to maintain control. She explained that Craig's anger about losing his job wasn't really about the job. It was about losing control over me. Without his income, he couldn't keep me dependent. That's why the violence got worse. I sat there processing this. She kept talking. The slap at the dinner wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time anyone else saw it. I realized she was right. I'd been making excuses for years, telling myself it wasn't that bad, that he was just stressed, that I was too sensitive. She handed me a tissue. You're starting to see the patterns now. That's the first step to breaking free. Brendan called Juliet's house a week later. She handed me the phone. It's Craig's coworker, the one who testified. I took it carefully. Hello? His voice was kind. I wanted to check if you're okay. I heard about Craig's arrest. Several people from the company have been worried. I felt tears start. I'm safe now. Thank you for telling the truth at the investigation. He was quiet for a second. A lot of people tried to pretend they didn't see anything. I couldn't do that. My wife and I both saw what he did to you. I thanked him again and we hung up. Juliet asked who it was. I explained and she smiled. See? Not everyone sided with Craig. Some people actually care about what's right. That night I thought about Brendan's call. About how he could have stayed quiet like everyone else. But he didn't. He spoke up even though it probably made things awkward at work. That mattered more than he knew. The phone rang one morning while Juliet was at the store. I answered without thinking. There was a recording. This is a call from an inmate at county jail. I almost hung up, but then I heard Craig's voice. Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. My finger hovered over the end button. I'm so sorry. The stress made me snap. I never meant to hurt you. His voice sounded broken. If you drop the charges, I'll get help. I promise. Real help this time. Therapy, anger management, whatever you want. I felt rage building in my chest. He was doing it again, making promises he wouldn't keep, trying to manipulate me into saving him. I hung up without saying a word. Then I called the jail and asked how to block their number. They walked me through it. When Juliet got home, I told her what happened. She put the groceries away and hugged me. You did the right thing. He'll keep trying to get to you. You have to stay strong. My hands were still shaking hours later. Mail came to Juliet's house the next week. 2 thick envelopes with the mortgage company's return address. One addressed to me at the old house. One addressed to me here. I opened them both. Foreclosure notices. We were 4 months behind. There was no way to catch up. I showed them to Juliet and she called my lawyer. The lawyer said to let the house go. It was in both our names, so Craig's debt wasn't my responsibility once we divorced. The bank would take the house and that would be the end of it. I felt weird about it. That house was supposed to be our future, our home. But it never really was. It was just a place where I was afraid. Letting it go felt like shedding dead weight. The lawyer said she'd handle the paperwork. I didn't need to do anything else. I threw the notices in the recycling and didn't think about them again. I started applying for jobs the following week. Sat at Juliet's kitchen table with my laptop and updated my resume. There was a huge gap where I should have been working. Craig always said his income was enough, that on being available for him. Now I saw it for what it was, another way to control me. I applied to 20 places in 3 days. Accounting firms, offices, anywhere that might hire someone with my old skills and a big gap in employment. Most didn't respond. A few sent rejection emails. Then one small firm called me in for an interview. The manager asked about the gap. I could have lied, but I was tired of hiding. I left an abusive situation. I'm rebuilding my life now. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she offered me an entry-level position starting in 2 weeks. I almost cried in her office. I took the job immediately. When I told Juliet, she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. You're doing it. You're really getting out. Juliet found a support group that met at her church for families affected by domestic violence. She asked if I wanted to go with her. I wasn't sure at first, but agreed. We drove there on a Tuesday night. The meeting was in a small room with chairs in a circle. About 10 people showed up. A facilitator welcomed everyone and asked if anyone wanted to share. One woman raised her hand. She talked about her son, how he'd been abusing his partner for years, how she didn't want to see it, made excuses, told herself it wasn't her business. Then one day the partner ended up in the hospital. That's when she finally faced what her son was. She cried through the whole story, said the guilt of not intervening sooner would stay with her forever. Other people shared too. Parents who'd enabled abusive children, siblings who'd looked the other way, partners who'd escaped and were trying to heal. I didn't share, but I listened. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone. After the meeting ended, Juliet and I sat in the car for a while. She wiped her eyes. I needed to hear that I'm not the only mother dealing with this. I squeezed her hand. We drove home in silence, but it felt different, like we weren't carrying it all by ourselves anymore. My lawyer called 3 days later. Craig's bail had been posted. Xavier used his house as collateral. I felt my stomach drop. She'd already filed for an emergency hearing about the restraining order. The prosecutor was furious that Craig's family helped him make bail after everything he'd done. Craig would be released that afternoon with an ankle monitor. He had strict orders not to violate the restraining order. 500 feet minimum distance at all times. I hung up and told Juliet. She went pale but nodded. We double-checked all the locks on her doors and windows, made sure the security system was armed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. At 2 a.m, Juliet's security system started beeping. Motion detected in the driveway. We both ran to the window. Nothing there. But the alert showed a car had pulled in, then backed out. Juliet called the police while I watched the street through a crack in the curtains. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. They searched the area and found Craig sitting in his car exactly 1 block away. Technically not violating the 500-foot restriction, but clearly watching the house. The officers talked to him for several minutes. Came back and told us he claimed he was just parked there thinking. They warned him that any closer approach would mean immediate arrest. He drove away slowly. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next afternoon, I went to the grocery store with Juliet. We were in the cereal aisle when I saw someone tall with dark hair wearing a jacket like Craig's. My chest got tight. I couldn't breathe. The person turned around and it wasn't him at all. Just some stranger who looked nothing like Craig from the front. But I was already hyperventilating. Juliet grabbed my arm and walked me outside. She made me sit on a bench and breathe slowly. Count to 4 breathing in, count to 4 breathing out. It took 20 minutes before my hands stopped shaking. Juliet drove us home and made me tea. She said I needed to see the therapist the shelter had recommended. I'd been putting it off, telling myself I was fine, but I clearly wasn't fine. I called and made an appointment for the following week, finally accepting that I needed real help to deal with everything. The therapist's office was small and quiet. She had me fill out paperwork about my safety situation first. Then we talked about what happened. She explained that my panic attack at the store was a normal trauma response. My brain was trying to protect me by staying alert for danger. That's why I saw Craig everywhere even when he wasn't there. She called it hypervigilance. Said it was my body's way of trying to keep me safe. We worked on grounding techniques. 5 things I could see. 4 things I could touch. 3 things I could hear. 2 things I could smell. 1 thing I could taste. It helped pull me back to the present when I started panicking. She also taught me breathing exercises and gave me homework about identifying my triggers. We made a safety plan for different scenarios. What to do if I saw Craig. What to do if he tried to contact me. What to do if I had another panic attack. Having a plan made me feel slightly more in control. My lawyer called again a few days later. Richard had sent a message through her. He wanted to write a statement supporting my divorce case. Said the company had dealt with several situations since Craig's termination, where his behavior was worse than people initially reported. Other employees had come forward with stories about Craig's anger issues and inappropriate comments about me. Richard was willing to document all of it. I told my lawyer yes immediately. Having Craig's former boss on record about his behavior felt important. Richard sent over a 3-page statement detailing specific incidents and conversations, including the time Craig had joked about keeping me in line at a previous company event, and the time he'd made comments about how wives needed to know their place. Things I hadn't known other people had witnessed and remembered. Then Craig's lawyer reached out about the divorce settlement, sent over a proposal that offered me almost nothing. The house was in foreclosure, so that was gone. Craig wanted to keep the car that was paid off, wanted me to take half the credit card debt. His lawyer actually wrote that I had destroyed Craig's career and earning potential, so I should share the financial consequences. My lawyer laughed when she read it to me over the phone. She sent back our counteroffer. I got the car. Half of whatever savings still existed. 0 responsibility for any debts Craig had hidden from me or created after his termination. We attached documentation of his abuse. Copies of the restraining order, the pending criminal charges, the police reports. My lawyer said no judge would side with an abusive unemployed defendant who was facing jail time. Craig's lawyer went quiet after that. I started my new job on a Monday morning. The office was small but bright. My boss showed me to my desk and introduced me to the other accountants. Everyone was friendly without being nosy. I spent the first week learning their software system and figuring out their filing processes. It felt good to use my brain for something other than fear and survival. My boss knew about my situation. She told me to just let her know if I needed time for therapy appointments or court dates. No questions asked. Having my own income again felt strange at first. Craig had always controlled our money. Told me his salary was enough. That now I saw it for what it was. Another way to keep me dependent and trapped. This paycheck was mine. I could spend it however I wanted. Save it. Use it to build my own life. It felt like getting back a piece of myself that Craig had stolen. The prosecutor called to schedule a meeting. The criminal trial was set for 6 weeks out. She wanted to prepare my testimony. We met at her office downtown. She had me walk through everything that happened the night Craig attacked me, asked detailed questions about previous incidents, showed me photos the police had taken of my injuries. She seemed confident about the case. Juliet's witness statement was powerful. The photos were clear evidence. Craig's termination record established a pattern of violence, but I was terrified of seeing Craig in court, of having to face him while talking about what he'd done. The prosecutor said that was normal, said I was stronger than I thought, that my testimony would help make sure Craig faced real consequences. I wanted to believe her. I practiced my statement over and over at home, trying to prepare myself for the moment I'd have to look at Craig and tell a courtroom full of strangers what he'd done to me. Juliet started getting mail from Craig's extended family. His aunt sent a long letter calling her a traitor for testifying against her own son, said family should stick together no matter what, that she was destroying Craig's life over a private matter between husband and wife. His cousin called her phone and left an angry message about how she'd ruined Craig's reputation. How could she side with me over her own blood? Juliet was hurt, but she didn't back down. She told me she was choosing to protect an innocent person over enabling an abuser. That real family doesn't cover up violence. She said if his relatives wanted to blame someone, they should blame Craig for his choices. I was amazed by her strength. She'd lost relationships with people she'd known her whole life, but she never wavered in supporting me and standing up to Craig. Then Craig violated the restraining order. Emails started showing up at my new work address. I don't know how he got it. The first one was an apology, saying he missed me and wanted to fix things. The second one came an hour later, angrier, blaming me for everything, saying I'd destroyed his life on purpose. The third one was a threat, that I'd regret what I'd done to him, that he'd make sure I paid for ruining him. I forwarded all three to my lawyer immediately. She filed a motion that same day. The police arrested Craig that evening for violating the restraining order. He'd sent 5 more emails by then, each one getting worse. The judge held a hearing the next morning, looked at the emails and the pattern of harassment, revoked Craig's bail entirely, said he'd proven he couldn't follow court orders and posed a danger to me. Craig was sent back to jail until the trial. This time Xavier didn't post bail. Maybe he finally saw who his brother really was. With Craig back in jail, I slept through the night for the first time in months. No jumping at sounds, no checking locks 3 times before bed, no lying awake waiting for him to come home angry. I woke up at 7 without an alarm and felt rested. Juliet noticed at breakfast the next morning. "You look better." I smiled. "I feel better." She squeezed my hand across the table. "You're eating more too." I hadn't realized, but she was right. Food tasted good again instead of sitting like rocks in my stomach. The constant fear that had defined every moment was lifting. I could breathe without that tight feeling in my chest. Could think about tomorrow without dread. Craig couldn't get to me now. Couldn't send emails or show up outside my work. The judge had made sure of that. I started sleeping with my bedroom door open at Juliet's house. Started leaving my phone in the kitchen overnight instead of clutching it like a lifeline. The cautious hope growing inside me felt fragile but real. Maybe I actually was safe now. Geneva reached out through Juliet 2 weeks later. She wanted to meet for coffee if I was comfortable with that. I remembered her from the company dinner. She'd been sitting 3 seats down when Craig hit me, had testified with her husband about what they saw. I met her at a cafe near my new job on a Saturday morning. She was waiting at a corner table with 2 coffees already ordered. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got you a vanilla latte." "That's perfect." We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke. "I wanted to tell you something. About why I testified." I listened. "My first husband hit me too. Years ago before I met Brendan. It went on for 3 years before I finally left." Geneva stirred her coffee without drinking it. "No one saw it happen back then. He was careful. Only hit me where clothes would cover the bruises. So when I saw Craig hit you in front of everyone, I knew I had to speak up. Had to be the witness I never had." Her eyes were wet. "Watching you report him gave me closure about my own past. Made me feel like maybe all that pain meant something if it helped me recognize what you were going through." I reached across the table and held her hand. "Thank you for telling the truth." She smiled. We became friends after that. Met for coffee every week. She introduced me to other women from a support group she attended. Women who'd survived situations like mine. Who understood the specific kind of fear that comes from being hurt by someone who's supposed to love you. They welcomed me without questions or judgment. Just offered support and shared their own stories of leaving and rebuilding. For the first time since Craig hit me at that dinner, I didn't feel alone. My attorney called 3 weeks before the trial. We got Craig's financial disclosure for the divorce. She sounded tense. "How bad is it?" "Worse than we expected. He's $30,000 in debt from credit cards you didn't know about." My stomach dropped. "30,000? He opened accounts in his name only over the past 2 years. Probably knew he was going to lose his job eventually with his behavior. Was preparing to stick you with the debt. But you won't be responsible. The cards are in his name. He hid them from you. That's fraud." I felt sick thinking about it. 2 years of secret debt while he controlled every dollar I spent. Complained when I bought groceries he didn't like. Made me account for every purchase. Meanwhile, he was racking up thousands on cards I didn't know existed. My attorney kept talking. The divorce will finalize your separation from his financial disaster. He can't touch your income or savings. Can't claim you owe half his hidden debt. I asked what he spent the money on. She paused. Mostly gambling. Online poker sites, sports betting, some cash advances we can't track. Craig had been losing thousands while blaming me for every financial problem, while making me feel guilty for wanting to work, while controlling every aspect of our money. The debt was just one more way he'd been lying. One more thing he'd hidden while making me feel like I was the problem. The foreclosure notice arrived in May. The house would be sold at auction in 3 weeks. I drove past it one afternoon after work. The lawn was overgrown, paint peeling on the shutters. It looked abandoned already. Juliet came with me to the auction. We sat in the back of the courthouse room while people bid. The house sold for $80,000 less than we owed on the mortgage. The bank would eat the difference. I felt nothing watching it happen. Juliet looked at me worried. Are you okay? I'm fine. She didn't believe me. That was your home for 8 years. I shook my head. It was never a home. Just a place where I was afraid. Where Craig controlled everything. Where I walked on eggshells trying not to set him off. Losing it doesn't hurt. Juliet squeezed my arm. She'd been saying similar things for weeks. That the house was just another tie to Craig. That letting it go was freedom. I finally understood what she meant sitting in that auction room. The building didn't matter. The mortgage didn't matter. They were just things Craig had used to trap me. To make me feel like I couldn't leave because we'd lose everything. Now it was gone and I felt lighter. One less thing connecting me to him. One less thing he could use to control my choices. We left the courthouse and I didn't look back. Therapy appointments became routine over the next month. Every Tuesday at 4. My therapist's office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She never pushed me to talk about things I wasn't ready for. We worked through the guilt first. The constant voice in my head saying I should have left sooner. Should have seen the signs. Should have been smarter or stronger. She asked me to describe the first time Craig hit me. I told her about the argument over dinner 3 years into our marriage. How he'd apologized after. Cried and promised it would never happen again. Bought me flowers. Was sweet for months. She nodded. That's the cycle of abuse. Violence followed by remorse followed by a honeymoon period. It's designed to keep you hoping things will get better. But they never do. The violence always comes back. I knew that now, but hearing her explain it helped. She talked about how abusers are skilled manipulators. How they exploit normal human desires for love and stability. How they isolate their victims and destroy their self-esteem until leaving feels impossible. You're not weak for staying. You're strong for surviving. And even stronger for leaving. I cried during most sessions, working through years of buried pain and fear. The anger at myself for wasting so much time, for believing Craig's promises, for thinking I could fix him if I just tried harder. My therapist helped me see that none of it was my fault, that Craig made choices, that his violence was about his need for control, not anything I did or didn't do. Slowly, I started forgiving myself for the years I lost. The criminal trial started on a Tuesday in June. I wore a navy dress Juliet had bought me, professional but not too formal. My attorney met me outside the courtroom. You ready? I nodded even though I wasn't. The prosecutor went through her opening statement, described the assault at the company dinner, the pattern of violence, the attack that led to Juliet's intervention. Craig sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't fit right anymore. He'd lost weight in jail, looked smaller somehow, but his eyes were the same, cold and angry when he looked at me. I was called to testify first, walked to the stand with my legs shaking. The prosecutor asked me to describe what happened at the company dinner in March. I told them about the joke, the slap, the blood, how Craig laughed like it was nothing. She asked about previous incidents. I described the time he shoved me into the kitchen counter, the time he grabbed my throat, the time he punched the wall next to my head. Craig's lawyer objected. Hearsay. No evidence these incidents occurred. The judge overruled. The witness is testifying to her own experience. Continue. I described the night Juliet stopped him, how he hit the back of my head over and over, how I thought he might kill me this time. The prosecutor showed photos of my injuries, asked me to identify them. That's my face 2 days after. The bruises on my neck, the split lip. Craig's lawyer cross-examined me, tried to suggest I exaggerated everything, that I planned to ruin Craig by going to HR, that I wanted his job and his money. The prosecutor objected. Your Honor, this is victim blaming. The judge sustained it. Counselor, focus your questions on the facts of the case. One more attempt to discredit the victim and I'll hold you in contempt. Craig's lawyer backed off, but the damage was done. He'd planted the seed that maybe I wasn't trustworthy, that maybe I had ulterior motives. I left the stand feeling shaky and exposed. Juliet testified the next day. She wore a simple black dress and gripped her purse in her lap. The prosecutor asked her to describe what she saw when she arrived at our house that night. Juliet's voice shook. I used my key to come in. Heard crying from the kitchen. Found Craig hitting my daughter-in-law repeatedly. She was on the floor. He wouldn't stop even though she was begging him to. Tears ran down Juliet's face, but she kept talking. I grabbed the frying pan from the stove and hit him. I had to. He was going to seriously hurt her. Maybe kill her. I could see it in his face. The rage. She described my injuries, the terror in my eyes, how I was shaking and couldn't stand up on my own, how Craig had been screaming that I deserved it, that I'd ruined his life. Several jury members looked at Craig with disgust. One woman wiped her eyes. Juliet's statement was clear and powerful. Craig's lawyer tried to discredit her on cross-examination. Isn't it true you've always favored your daughter-in-law over your own son? Juliet stared at him. I favor protecting innocent people over enabling abusers. Even when the abuser is my son. The lawyer tried again. You attacked your son with a weapon. That's assault. Juliet didn't flinch. I stopped him from beating someone to death. I'd do it again. The prosecutor smiled slightly. No further questions. Brendan testified in the afternoon. Described the company dinner in detail. How I'd made a harmless joke. How everyone laughed. How Craig's face changed. Then he hit her. Right across the mouth. Hard enough that she bled. Craig laughed about it. Made a joke about keeping his wife in line. Geneva testified next. Her account matched exactly. She described the blood. The red mark on my cheek. How Craig squeezed my shoulder hard enough to leave bruises. How uncomfortable everyone was. But nobody said anything except to change the subject. The prosecutor asked if there was any doubt about what they saw. None. He hit her in front of 12 people. Craig's lawyer tried to shake their testimony. Couldn't you have been mistaken? Maybe it was just a playful tap. Brendan looked at him like he was stupid. I know the difference between a playful tap and a man hitting his wife hard enough to split her lip. There's no mistake. Geneva backed him up. Multiple witnesses saw the same thing because it happened exactly how we're describing it. The prosecutor rested her case. Strong evidence, clear testimony, photos and medical records, Craig's termination paperwork. The pattern was undeniable. Craig took the stand the next morning. His lawyer asked him to explain his side of the story. Craig blamed me for everything. She went to my work to destroy my career. She knew exactly what would happen if she reported that dinner. She wanted me to lose my job. The prosecutor objected, but the judge let him continue. Craig kept going. I was under enormous stress. 20 years with that company. She provoked me constantly. Made jokes at my expense. Undermined me in front of my colleagues. I snapped. It was a mistake, but she's not innocent here. His lawyer asked about the attack at our house. Craig claimed I'd attacked him first. That Juliet only saw the end of the fight. That he was defending himself. The jury looked skeptical. The prosecutor destroyed him on cross-examination. Mr. Hamilton, you testified your wife provoked you. What exactly did she say that warranted physical violence? Craig fumbled. She was always criticizing me. So criticism justifies hitting someone? Craig got defensive. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Answer the question. Does criticism justify hitting your wife? No, but... So you hit her without justification. I didn't say that. The prosecutor pulled out his termination paperwork. This document states you were fired for physical violence against your spouse. You told your boss she provoked you. Told HR she was always provoking you. Told your brother she provoked you. Do you see a pattern? Craig's face turned red. She did provoke me. How many times have you hit your wife over the course of your marriage? Craig hesitated. I don't know. More than 5 times? Yes. More than 10? Probably. The prosecutor looked at the jury. So this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern of violence spanning years. Craig tried to recover. But I never meant to really hurt her. Yet you hit her hard enough to split her lip in public. Hit her repeatedly in your home until your mother had to physically stop you. That's not trying to hurt someone? The jury looked appalled. Craig's lawyer had no redirect that could fix the damage. His client had just admitted to years of abuse. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Juliet and I waited in the hallway outside the courtroom. My attorney brought us coffee. They're coming back. We filed back in. The jury foreman stood. We find the defendant guilty of domestic assault. Craig's face went white. The judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks out. Craig was led away in handcuffs. He looked back at me one more time. I stared back without flinching. The overwhelming relief hit me all at once. I started crying in the courtroom. Juliet pulled me into a hug while I sobbed into her shoulder. It's over. He can't hurt you anymore. The prosecutor came over after. Strong testimony. You should be proud. I could barely speak through the tears. Thank you. She squeezed my arm. You're going to be okay. I believed her for the first time. The sentencing hearing happened 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom with Juliet beside me, her hand gripping mine tight. The judge reviewed Craig's file for what felt like forever. She looked up at him standing there in his orange jumpsuit and shackles. The judge talked about how his violence got worse over time because nobody stopped him. She said when people see abuse and do nothing, it tells the abuser he can keep going. She mentioned the company dinner where his coworkers saw him hit me, but most of them tried to pretend it didn't happen. Then she talked about how he attacked me at home and would have kept going if his own mother hadn't stepped in. The judge sentenced Craig to 18 months in jail. After that, 3 years of probation with mandatory anger management classes and domestic violence counseling every week. Craig's lawyer tried to argue for less time, but the judge shut him down fast. She told Craig he was lucky she wasn't giving him more. Craig turned and stared at me as the officers moved to take him away. His eyes were full of hate and blame. I looked right back at him without dropping my gaze. My hands weren't shaking anymore. He was the one in handcuffs now, not me. The officers led him through the side door, and he was gone. Juliet squeezed my hand, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. It was really over. The divorce moved faster than I expected. My lawyer filed the paperwork right after Craig's sentencing. Craig didn't fight anything from jail. He signed whatever they put in front of him. Maybe he finally understood he had no leverage left. Maybe he just didn't care anymore. 2 weeks after his sentencing, I walked into the courthouse for the final hearing. Craig wasn't even there. His lawyer appeared on his behalf and agreed to everything. I got the car that was already paid off. Half of what little money we had left in savings, which was only about $2,000. Most importantly, I got zero responsibility for his debts. All those credit cards he'd racked up while unemployed were his problem now. The judge signed the papers and declared our marriage dissolved. 8 years of my life, gone with a signature. I walked out of that courthouse and stood on the steps in the sunshine, legally free. My lawyer shook my hand and congratulated me. I drove back to Juliet's house in my car, the one thing from my marriage I actually wanted to keep. I parked in her driveway and just sat there for a minute. No more Craig, no more walking on eggshells, no more wondering when he'd snap next. I cried in the car, but they were different tears than before. These ones felt like relief. I started looking for apartments the next day. Juliet said I could stay as long as I needed, but I wanted my own place, somewhere that was just mine. I found a tiny one-bedroom near my work. The rent was cheap because the building was old and the neighborhood wasn't fancy. I didn't care. It had good locks on the door and windows. That's what mattered. Geneva helped me move in with donations from her church. A couch someone was getting rid of. A kitchen table with mismatched chairs. Dishes and pots from the thrift store. Juliet gave me her old TV and some lamps. Brendan and Geneva dropped off boxes of kitchen supplies they didn't need. In 2 days, I had a furnished apartment. It looked like a college dorm room, but it was mine. I bought new locks for the door and installed them myself. Changed the bathroom lock too. Hung curtains on every window so nobody could see in. I arranged the furniture so I could see the door from anywhere in the main room. My therapist said this was normal, wanting to control my environment after years of feeling unsafe. I bought a cheap bookshelf and put it together following the instructions. Filled it with books from the library sale. Hung a calendar on the wall and marked off the days until Craig's release date, still over a year away. That first night alone in my apartment, I locked the door and checked it 3 times. Made sure all the windows were secure. Then I sat on my donated couch and looked around at my tiny space. Nobody could come in unless I let them. Nobody could hurt me here. I slept better that night than I had in months. 3 months into my job, my boss called me into her office. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, she offered me a raise and more responsibilities. She said I was reliable and my work was always accurate. She asked if I wanted to take on some of the monthly reports and help train the new hire starting next week. I said yes immediately. The raise was only 50 cents an hour, but it felt huge. My boss mentioned there might be room for advancement if I wanted to pursue some additional training. She had information about online accounting courses through the local community college. I took the brochures home and looked through them that night. Craig had always told me I wasn't smart enough for real accounting work, that I should just be grateful he made enough money for both of us. I enrolled in 2 classes starting the following month. Basic accounting principles and Excel for business. The courses were cheap and I could do the work at night after my job. I set up a little desk area in the corner of my apartment with my laptop, printed out the syllabi and put them in a binder. I was rebuilding the career I'd given up when Craig convinced me I didn't need one. Every assignment I completed felt like taking back a piece of myself he'd stolen. Juliet and I fell into a routine. Dinner at her house every Tuesday night. She'd cook and we'd talk about our weeks. Once a month, we went to the support group together. Juliet started volunteering at the domestic violence shelter on weekends. She helped with intake interviews and donated clothes and household items. She told me that turning her pain into something useful made her feel less guilty about not seeing Craig's abuse sooner. I understood that. We both needed to feel like something good came from all this. One Tuesday, Juliet told me she'd been asked to speak at a community event about domestic violence awareness. She wanted to talk about her experience as a mother who had to choose between protecting her son and protecting his victim. She was nervous, but determined. I went to the event to support her. Watched her stand up in front of 50 people and tell them about hitting Craig with that frying pan, about choosing to believe me over her own son, about the guilt and the grief and the certainty that she'd done the right thing. People came up to her afterward. Other mothers dealing with abusive sons, family members struggling with the same choices. Juliet gave them her phone number and told them to call anytime. She'd found her purpose. We both had. Geneva invited me to her book club 6 months after the trial. I was nervous about meeting new people, about them asking questions about my past. Geneva promised they were good women who minded their own business. The book club met every other Thursday at different members' houses. 8 women ranging from mid-20s to late 60s. They welcomed me without any awkward questions. Just asked what kinds of books I liked and handed me wine. We discussed the current book, some mystery novel I hadn't read. I mostly listened, but they didn't seem to mind. After the book discussion ended, they talked about normal things. Kids and jobs and recipes and vacation plans. Nobody asked about my divorce or why I was new in town or where I worked. It was the most normal social interaction I'd had in years. Geneva walked me to my car afterward. She said she'd told the group I was rebuilding my life, and they understood that meant no nosy questions. I hugged her and thanked her for giving me this. The next book club meeting, I actually read the book first. Participated in the discussion. Laughed at someone's joke about the ridiculous plot twist. Stayed late helping clean up. Slowly, carefully, I was learning to trust people again. Learning that not everyone would hurt me. That some people were just genuinely kind. I ran into Xavier at the grocery store on a Saturday morning. I was comparing prices on coffee when I heard someone say my name. I turned and there he was, Craig's brother. The one who'd called me dramatic and told me to help Craig fix his mess. My first instinct was to leave my cart and walk out. But Xavier looked different. Smaller somehow. He approached carefully, hands visible like he was afraid I'd run. He apologized. Said he'd been visiting Craig in jail every month and finally saw what everyone else had seen. His brother was manipulative and refused to take responsibility for anything. Every visit, Craig blamed me or his job or his stress. Never once admitted he'd done something wrong. Xavier said it opened his eyes to how Craig had always been. The way he'd treated girlfriends before me, the way he talked about women in general. Xavier apologized for not believing me, for pressuring me to help Craig, for being part of the problem. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I thanked him for the apology, but I told him I wasn't ready to have him in my life, that I needed to maintain boundaries with Craig's family. Xavier nodded like he expected that. Said he understood and wouldn't bother me again. I watched him walk away and felt something shift. His apology didn't fix anything, but it confirmed what I already knew. The problem was never me. My therapist sessions focused on identifying warning signs in relationships. She had me make lists of red flags I'd missed with Craig. The way he isolated me from friends, how he controlled money and decisions, his pattern of blaming me for his feelings, the subtle put-downs that made me doubt myself. We worked on building my confidence in my own judgment. She said I had good instincts, but Craig had spent years training me not to trust them. We practiced setting boundaries in different scenarios. How to recognize when someone was testing my limits. How to say no without over-explaining or apologizing. She taught me that healthy people respect boundaries without argument. That someone who makes you feel guilty for having limits is showing you who they are. We discussed what healthy relationships look like. Partners who support your goals instead of discouraging them. People who take responsibility for their actions instead of blaming you. Communication without fear of punishment. My therapist said I'd made remarkable progress. That my coping mechanisms were healthy now instead of survival-based. She believed I could have a future without fear controlling every choice. I was starting to believe it too. The panic attacks were less frequent. I could go whole days without thinking about Craig. I was sleeping better and eating regularly. Small victories that added up to a real life. Craig got released after serving 12 months. His lawyer got him out early for good behavior. My victim advocate called to tell me before it happened. She reviewed his probation conditions with me. Continued counseling twice a week. No contact with me whatsoever. Random check-ins with his probation officer. If he violated any condition, he'd go straight back to jail. The advocate gave me the probation officer's direct number in case I saw Craig anywhere near me. I felt anxiety building as his release date approached. Started checking my locks more often, looking over my shoulder in parking lots. My therapist reminded me I had legal protections now. A support system. Resources and people who believed me. Craig couldn't just show up and hurt me without immediate consequences. The day of his release came and went. Nothing happened. No phone calls or messages. No sightings. My probation officer contact called a week later to confirm Craig had checked in and was complying with all conditions. He was working at a warehouse across town and living in a small apartment, staying away from me. I realized I'd been holding my breath for a week. Slowly, I started relaxing again. He was out, but he wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life now, one he couldn't touch. My boss called me into her office 9 months after I started. She offered me a promotion to senior accounting associate. Significant salary increase. My own small office instead of a cubicle. Supervision of 2 junior associates. She said my attention to detail was exceptional. That I was reliable and professional. That other departments had noticed my work and requested me specifically for their projects. I accepted on the spot. Walked back to my cubicle trying not to cry. I'd done this. Proved I was capable and valuable. Built a career from nothing while recovering from years of abuse. The promotion came with business cards. I held one in my hand and stared at my name with the title under it. Senior Accounting Associate. Craig had spent years telling me I wasn't smart enough for real work. That I should be grateful he supported us. That I'd never make it on my own. I was making more now than he had before he got fired. Supporting myself completely. Thriving instead of just surviving. I put the business card on my refrigerator. A reminder that I'd built this life myself. That I was exactly as capable as I'd always suspected, before Craig spent years convincing me otherwise. I called Juliet that night and told her about the promotion. She cried happy tears and said she was proud of me. I was proud of me too. Juliet called me 3 weeks into Craig's probation. His officer checked in with her since she was listed as a contact. Craig got a job at a warehouse loading trucks. He rented a small apartment across town near the industrial park. The officer told Juliet that Craig showed up for his counseling sessions and passed his random check-ins. But the officer didn't sound confident about real change, just compliance because the alternative was jail. I thanked Juliet for telling me and felt my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. Knowing where Craig was and that someone monitored him made the world feel safer. He wasn't lurking around corners or planning to show up at my apartment. He had his own life now, one that didn't involve me. A year passed. The calendar marked 12 months since I walked out of Juliet's house and into my own apartment. The Domestic Violence Awareness Center downtown hosted an event where survivors shared their stories on stage. I got the flyer at my therapist's office. Geneva called me the same day. "Are you going?" "I'm thinking about volunteering to help organize." I told her I wasn't ready to speak publicly, but I wanted to help. We met with the coordinator the following week. They needed people to greet attendees, hand out resources, and support survivors who got emotional during the presentations. Geneva and I signed up together. The night of the event, we stood at the welcome table giving out programs and resource packets. Woman after woman walked in looking nervous. Some brought friends. Others came alone. Geneva squeezed my hand when a young woman started crying while reading the shelter information. We both knew that feeling. That moment of realizing you're not crazy or weak. That what happened to you has a name and other people survived it too. After the presentations ended, Geneva and I stayed to help clean up. The coordinator asked if we'd volunteer regularly. They ran support groups twice a month for newly escaped survivors. We both said yes. Book club met every other Thursday at the coffee shop near my apartment. I'd been going for 6 months. We read everything from mysteries to memoirs. One of the members was a guy named Tom who always brought homemade cookies. He was quiet during discussions but asked good questions. After one meeting, he walked out the same time I did. Our cars were parked near each other. He asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. I froze for a second, then said yes, but told him I needed to take things slow. He smiled and said that was fine. We met for coffee first, then lunch. I told him about Craig on our third date. Not all the details, but enough that he understood I had history. Tom listened without interrupting. He said he appreciated me being honest, that he'd go at whatever pace I needed. My therapist helped me work through the panic that came with dating again, the fear that I'd miss red flags or pick another Craig. She reminded me that I knew what healthy looked like now, that I had tools to recognize manipulation. Tom never pushed, never got angry when I said I wasn't ready for something. He respected every boundary I set. It felt strange at first, then it felt right. Juliet invited me to Sunday dinner at her house. When I arrived, 2 of Craig's aunts were there. I almost turned around and left, but Juliet grabbed my hand and pulled me inside. The aunts hugged me. They apologized for not believing me sooner, for thinking I exaggerated or caused problems. One of them said she talked to Craig in jail and finally saw what Juliet had been trying to tell them, that Craig blamed everyone but himself, that he showed no real remorse. The other aunt said her own daughter left an abusive marriage last year, that watching me stand up to Craig gave her daughter courage to leave too. Juliet made pot roast, and we sat around her table talking. Some of Craig's family still refused to speak to Juliet. His brother Xavier barely acknowledged her at their mother's funeral the previous winter, but Juliet said she was at peace with losing relationships that required her to accept abuse. She looked at me across the table and said that real family protects victims, not abusers. I felt tears in my eyes. She'd chosen me over her own son. That meant everything. Craig's probation officer called my victim advocate 18 months after his release. Craig completed his jail sentence and probation without any violations. His counselor reported moderate progress in accepting responsibility for his actions. The advocate asked if I wanted any additional information. I said no. I didn't care about Craig's redemption story. Whether he changed or learned or grew into a better person didn't matter to me. What mattered was that he stayed away, that I rebuilt my entire life without him in it. His consequences were about justice, about holding him accountable, not about fixing him or giving him another chance. The advocate understood. She said some survivors needed to know their abuser changed. Others just needed to know they were safe. I was the second kind. 2 years after leaving Craig, I sat in my apartment looking at everything I'd built. Senior accounting associate at a company that valued my work. A relationship with Tom that felt healthy and equal. Therapy sessions where I processed trauma instead of just surviving it. Friends who supported me. A life that belonged completely to me. I still had bad days. Moments where I checked over my shoulder in parking lots or flinched at loud noises. Nights where I dreamed about Craig's hand across my face. But my therapist said that was normal. That trauma leaves marks even after you heal. The difference was that the anxiety didn't control me anymore. I had tools to manage it, people to call when it got bad. I knew what safety felt like now. Real safety. Not the fake version where you walk on eggshells hoping to avoid the next explosion. I'd reclaimed my life completely. Every piece of it was mine. Tom and I sat on my couch 6 months later. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his glasses. Then he pulled out a small box, asked if I'd marry him. I stared at the ring. A simple silver band with a small diamond. Nothing flashy, just honest and real like everything else about Tom. I said yes. We planned a small wedding. just close friends and family. Juliet cried when I told her. Said she'd be honored to come. Geneva and Brendan were invited. The few co-workers I'd gotten close to. Tom's parents and sister. No big ceremony, no fancy venue. Just the people who mattered celebrating something good. Tom knew my whole story, every ugly part. He loved me anyway. Not despite the trauma, but including it. He saw me as whole, not broken. The wedding felt like celebrating more than new love. It felt like celebrating survival, like proving that Craig didn't get to write the ending to my story. The morning of my wedding, Juliet helped me get ready in the small room behind the courthouse where we'd hold the ceremony. She fixed my hair and straightened my dress. A simple white sundress, nothing fancy. When the music started, Juliet walked me down the short aisle. Both of us had tears running down our faces. She leaned close and whispered that she was proud of my strength, that she was grateful she found her own courage in time to help. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Told her she saved my life that night with the frying pan, that I wouldn't be here without her. We hugged in the middle of the aisle while everyone watched. Then she kissed my cheek, and I walked toward Tom, toward my future, toward everything Craig tried to take from me. Marriage to Tom was nothing like marriage to Craig. We made decisions together. Actually together. Not Craig deciding and me agreeing to avoid conflict. Tom asked my opinion about everything from what to have for dinner to where we should live. We talked through disagreements instead of one person dominating. He supported my career goals and celebrated my promotions. I supported his decision to go back to the school for his teaching certificate. We created a home where both of us felt safe, where neither of us walked on eggshells or feared the other's reaction. I finally understood what healthy love looked like. It looked like respect, like equality, like two people choosing each other every day because they wanted to, not because they were trapped. The domestic violence shelter called asking if I'd speak at their volunteer training. Geneva and I had been co-leading support groups for 6 months, working with newly escaped survivors, helping them navigate restraining orders and divorce proceedings and finding their own apartments, using everything I learned to help others. I said yes to the speaking request, stood in front of 30 volunteers and told my story. About Craig's public slap that ended his career, about Juliet's intervention with the frying pan, about rebuilding my life piece by piece. After I finished, a young woman raised her hand, asked how I found the courage to leave. I told her I didn't feel courageous. I felt terrified. But I did it anyway because staying was worse than the fear of leaving. Geneva squeezed my shoulder. We handed out resources and answered questions. Turning my trauma into purpose felt like the ultimate way to reclaim my story. Craig tried to destroy me. Instead, I used what he did to help others escape. That felt like winning. 3 years passed. I got a message from someone who worked at the domestic violence shelter. A woman had come in asking about resources. She mentioned her husband's name during intake. Craig. The counselor thought I should know he'd remarried. I sat with that information for a full day. Felt nothing but relief mixed with worry. Relief that he was someone else's problem now. Worry for whoever she was. I didn't know her name or anything about her, but I knew what she was living with. The counselor asked if I wanted to reach out. I said no. Instead, I sent an anonymous packet to every domestic violence resource in Craig's area. Included his full history. The company dinner, the termination, the arrests, the conviction, everything documented and public record. Added a note that this man had a pattern and his new wife should know the signs. Mailed it to 3 different organizations. I'd done what I could. The rest was up to her to recognize what was happening and get out. I couldn't save someone who didn't know she needed saving yet. My boss called me into her office on a Tuesday morning. I thought I'd messed up a report. Instead, she offered me the accounting manager position. Supervising a team of 4. Salary was $60,000 a year, more than Craig ever made in his 20 years at that company. I accepted immediately and called my spouse from the parking lot. We celebrated that night by looking at houses online. Small ones, affordable ones that could actually be ours. We found a 2-bedroom cottage 20 minutes from my office. Needed work but had good bones. We put in an offer and it got accepted within a week. Moved in 2 months later with help from Juliet and Geneva. Every room felt safe. Every door was a boundary I controlled. I picked the paint colors, chose the furniture, decided where things went. My spouse respected every choice and added their own touches. We created something together that felt like an actual home. Not a place where I walked on eggshells. A place where I could breathe. Juliet came over for dinner on a Saturday in October. 5 years to the day since she'd hit Craig with that frying pan. We didn't plan it as a celebration exactly. More like an acknowledgement. She brought wine and I made pasta. We sat on my back porch watching the sunset. She squeezed my hand and said that night changed everything. For both of us. She'd become a fierce advocate for domestic violence awareness. Spoke at community events about not enabling abusive family members. Told her story about protecting her son until she couldn't anymore. About choosing to save me instead. People listened because she wasn't a victim. She was a mother who'd failed to act for too long and then finally did the right thing. Her talks filled auditorium seats. She got letters from other parents who'd recognized their own children's behavior. From people who'd left abusers after hearing her speak. We'd both transformed our pain into purpose and power. Turned the worst moments of our lives into something that helped others. That felt like the ultimate victory over Craig. I think about that company dinner sometimes. Craig slapping me in front of everyone. How it felt like the end of the world in that moment. My face bleeding. Everyone staring. The shame burning through me. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my freedom. His violence in front of witnesses forced me to stop hiding and start fighting for myself. If he'd only hit me at home like all the times before, I might have stayed. Might have believed his excuses and promises to change. The public nature of it gave me proof. Gave me witnesses. Gave me the push I needed to report him and leave. I'm not grateful for the abuse. Won't ever say I'm glad it happened. But I'm proud of the survivor I became. Strong enough to rebuild from nothing. Independent enough to trust my own choices. Happy in a way I never thought possible when I was married to Craig. He tried to destroy me and failed. I'm still here. Still standing. Still moving forward. And he's just a bad memory that gets smaller every year.